Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We are here with Bill Manning, our solution engineer and manager. Bill will explain us how to get started with the JFrog platform, and he will provide us even with a demo. So thanks so much, Bill, for your help. We are really looking forward to hear from you, and the stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Hi, everybody. How you doing? Today, we're going to be getting started with the JFrog platform on the Google Cloud platform. Well, this is exciting. So as stated, my name is Bill Manning or William Manning. You can contact me at billm@jfrog.com if you have any questions or anything like that. My responsibility is to work with our partners and our customers, also too with our alliances like Google, to make sure people understand exactly what JFrog is and what the JFrog platform can do for organizations. So to get started, just to let you know what's going on, we're going to do a quick overview of the JFrog platform and also some information around JFrog itself. We're going to take a big deep dive into software supply chain and the importance of the reason why the JFrog platform is the premier solution to ensure that organizations have a very solid and secure software supply chain. And of course, I'm going to do a demonstration of some of these features just to kind of give you an idea of what's implicitly possible. Things that we'll be discussing today is, of course, things like repositories on where you store the binaries and where you actually, use the binaries from third-party transit dependencies down to the builds you create, and also ways to, ensure the safety and security. We'll touch on some advanced features, such as our distribution platform and our pipelines a little bit. We won't go too deep into that because really we'll focus on the primary use case, which is the artifact management, binary management, build management, and of course, the precedence of security. So to understand what we do as a corporation, what we are is an end-to-end DevSecOps platform, really is what it comes down to. Over, almost 8,000 corporations globally, almost 100% of the Fortune 100, top 10 banks, auto manufacturers, avionics, aeronautics, food, retail, military, governments. Why do they choose JFrog as their platform of choice for all their software build purposes, right? Their software supply chain, their SDLC, their software development lifecycle. And really what it comes down to is that we offer freedom of choice, consistency, and security. We support over 32 package types, everything from low-level things like C and C++ with Conan, up to more orchestration things like Helm and Kubernetes, with Docker and Helm. And on top of that, things like infrastructure as code with Terraform, even to like iOS and Android development, you name it. Basically, we have a way to make sure that your organization operates efficiently, whether it's an individual or two people working in a garage, the old adage of the startup, all the way down to large, massive corporations that use us for their global developments. Because one of the other key features here is it allows consistency among your development organization globally. And on top of that, we have the ability for your customers to migrate from like either maybe their own DC up into GCP, the ability to use both in a hybrid solution, to use GCP also too in multiple regions and provide that same level of consistency no matter where they are, including the security aspects behind this. In some cases, you might have some of your customers that are on multiple clouds besides GCP. We can be in those also. There's also options to, either get directly from us, get a license installed in their own GCP instance. We have a managed version of our platform that can be hosted in GCP. And I like to say managed versus SaaS. It is a SaaS platform, but it is managed because instead of you just, you could choose your own cloud provider, you can choose the regions you want, how you want them deployed, and we take care of it for you. So, also too, you can also get it from more of the Google Marketplace style. So if they, your customers have very many options to use our platform in many different ways to do it. On top of that, we have a massive ecosystem that we integrate into. We've always had this mentality of a universal approach. We actually call ourselves the Universal Binary Repository Manager for a reason. We've built it with that in mind, and we have lots of partnerships that have built integrations into this. We also have things like CI integrations, right? Continuous integration, continuous delivery systems, and then, that we integrate into. So the thing is that no matter what your customers are looking at, we have a way to mold ourselves into it to make it more applicable for them. And that's one of the major reasons why so many companies come to us. And I'll tell you, I've been with the company for a long time. And the big thing is I've never seen two companies exactly the same, which really bodes well for us because we learn from it and our customers learn from us. So the JFrog platform details a lot of different things, different aspects of the software development lifecycle of most corporations. If we were to look at all the pieces that we offer, we'll start off in the center, the cornerstone of our technology. We started back in 2008, so we've been doing this for a long time. We are a public company. We are actually board members of the Cloud Native Foundation, the Rust Nation. I mean, numerous organizations. We are out there. We're part of Ironpart. Just so you know, if you have any government entities, we're part of Iron Bank, and we're also part of Platform One. So we're actually approved for that too. But Artifactory is really the core, the central component of our, it manages the third-party transit dependencies. When I talk about supply chain, that make up 85 to 90% of the things that you produce. It also helps you manage the things that you produce, whether, like I said, whether it's C code, Docker images, Helm charts, Terraform templates, iOS applications. It's a way to go ahead and also emulate your SDLC, which I'll talk about today, where you have dev QA staging at production. And in today's modern day DevSecOps practices and even platform engineering, if you were to think about it that way, some of the key components of this is, or if you think about methodologies like 12-factor or multi-tier or those, the idea is simple. You have an atomic unit, something you produce in dev should be the same thing you put into production. And we produce a system for you with Artifactory where you have accountability for every aspect of that development process. Now, of course, I mentioned software supply chain. So we have our XRAY product. What is the distinguishing feature of our XRAY product compared to most security solutions out there? There are tons of them out there. Don't get me wrong, but they're all point solutions, meaning that at that explicit point of time, they tell you if something is wrong. Where XRAY is different. XRAY is truly end-to-end, and we like to also say CS, continuous security. And it's the way we designed Artifactory and the symbiotic relationship between XRAY and Artifactory that allows us to do this. So we can do everything from shift left by giving you the maximum ROI for any software supply chain tool, where you can even pre-evaluate binaries that are being pulled in. So somebody does like an npm install, it pulls down the implicit transitive dependency they want and all its transitive friends. Usually it's like 300-400 ones that come along with it. It's ridiculous, but we evaluate those too, and we'll talk about that. We can also integrate that security behind the scenes into the build system and also actively in the build system, meaning you can make it a step in your CI process. We can even manage that security all the way down to the CD, right? So before you deploy something into your environment, you can make sure one last time before it gets out there, is there something potentially malicious or nefarious in the thing that you're about to release into production. We also have our JFrog to the top left pipelines products, our CI, CD, and CI orchestration tool. It's built for scale. It's actually built with Kubernetes in mind, meaning that the runtime environments that you can use to do the builds that you do can be customized for you. It could be Windows-based images. It could be, CentOS or Debian-based images. It's all based in YAML, like very standard build templates. And you can actually standardize those build templates and have it so that your organization has standardized processes across the board. It could also be used for CD, so you can use it as a way to distribute. There's no, by the way, plugins. It's all based on native API integrations, so you get the full access to integrations, and you can use standard tools, even like Bash or PowerShell. In the center, we have mission control. It's a holistic view of how the system is doing globally, because like I said, we actually designed this to be in global reach. And one of the things we'll talk about as this discussion is replication. How do you replicate binaries, both the things that you use to build your software and the software you produce for more global style organizations? Once again, lending a sense of credibility. So if you have 10,000 developers and you have a developer like Developer Zero, who brings in a set of libraries to do something fantastic with the software you're building, that means that all 9,999 other developers have access to that same set of binaries and credibility and consistency. And on top of that, also supplying some level of security, ensuring that those components are not malicious. Actually, later on this month, I'll be giving a talk on things like 0 day. And one of the things, as I mentioned, continuous security. So this also with mission control also lets you know whether or not those sites that you're relying on for those global development styles are active and what the current state they're in, and also have they been replicated. To the right of that, we have distribution. Distribution is a way for you to get your software to where it needs to be, whether it's your customers, where they can download software, distribute software to devices, or distribute software to whatever they want. You can also use it as a way to distribute your software to other regions, or even to like other DCs or wherever, by pushing out things called release bundles. Release bundles are digitally signed, immutable packages where you could wrap up a Helm chart and say Docker containers and some Terraform templates to deploy web service, providing consistency in deployment of that web service globally. Say you have IoT as part of your organization. To the bottom right, we have JFrog Connect. It's a device manager, device updater, remote diagnostics, process monitor. It's a full-fledged, actually, IoT platform that allows you to distribute and actually monitor and maintain the state of those devices you might have in the field, whether it's one device or a million devices. And then we have, of course, metrics that you can pull from this. So we have JFrog Insight. And what that allows you to do is, how are you doing as an organization in terms of, say, your velocity, right? How many things have I developed and how many things have made it to production? How am I doing in terms of my security posture? Am I addressing all the potential threats and stuff that might be going into the software that I have? So understanding that, this is a full end-to-end DevSecOps platform, and we'll go into a little more detail on each one of these, but today we'll be focusing mainly on JFrog Artifactory and, of course, our XRAY product, and we'll touch upon some of the other components here. So saying that, I want to kick off with software supply chain, because this really is where it all matters most, right? Every piece of software is made up of other software and other software and other software. And if we were to look at a standard developer, when we look at the development we have here, you have the developer, he gets handed a project, he uses some third-party transitive dependencies, he does an install, in this case for, say, NPM, it goes to a third-party remote resource, pulls down that transitive dependency that he implicitly stated, and then also there's a lot of indirect along with it. That transitive dependency and all those indirect transitive dependencies are really what makes up the software supply chain. But the thing is every time you do this is one of my favorite quotes, is every time you do a pip install, go get Maven fetch, you're basically doing the equivalent of grabbing a thumb drive you found on the street and just plugging it right in your production server. If you think about this, that's actually a very detrimental thing. The thing is that I'm a coder by trade. I grew up as a coder, even in my early youth. I mean, yeah, I have a lot on my face here that's gray. Obviously, I've been doing this for a long time. But the thing is that coders are artisans, right? They're masters of their craft. The idea is that their palette is those third-party transitive dependencies they use to create the art they create. But how do you make sure that they don't lose that creativity? How do you make sure that they can still do the job that they do, how they can innovate more by still also applying some level of security to it? Because just remember, 85 to 90% of the software that you build is someone else's software, someone else you don't know. Right? Free and open source software. We hear it all the time, free as in speech, not as in beer, and the thing is that when we come down to it, 75% of the stuff that you use contain at least one major vulnerability, right? At least came some sort of level of vulnerability that could jeopardize your organization and could cause potential threats and issues. And the thing is that when you look at it, though, 49% of that actually has one high-risk vulnerability, something that could actually potentially be even more threatening than you realize to an organization. And the thing is that 90% of the stuff that you use is actually, as funny as, is old, outdated, or contains at least one major vulnerability or has been abandoned completely. Think about this. You're building the latest software, the greatest software for your organization. And the thing is that you're using stuff that's old, outdated, and abandoned, or things that could potentially risk your company, not only in terms of financial, but also to things like reputation. So when we think about that, just to let you know, in 2021, there was a 650% increase in supply chain attacks. And last year, there was a 40% increase on top of that. Why? Because there's many different reasons. I mean, I give complete talks on this and other, like full hour talks just on this subject alone, because the thing is that, it's easy for people to infiltrate these free and open source communities. We're very welcoming in that respect. And on top of that, they could do things such as, most of the time, it's not what you think. It's not the implicit portion of this. The thing is that when you look at this, it's actually more like the actual indirect transitive dependencies that come along with it. I mean, look at something like, everybody knows about SolarWinds. It's the one that really lit a fire under everybody's butt in terms of security, in building security. I mean, it's always been there. We've always had some sort of security posture around it, but it came very precedent because there's just a scope and the scale in which it affected organizations, not only in terms of number of organizations, but also the financial impact. And the thing was, it was actually a fourth level indirect transitive dependency. It came in under the radar. So you always want to make sure that you're safe and secure when you start looking at things like this, right? And this is really where our product really lends the most amount of effectiveness to it. So when we talk about this kind of things, we talk about, JFrog XRAY. I want you to be aware of the things I'm talking about, because when you talk to your customers, it's not just about storing. It's not just about replicating. It's also about the impact of the security posture. And also, too, remember, any sort of security issue in terms of development, if you discover it in production, is 100 times more expensive than if you develop, you discover it at the developer level, where the developer impact is greatest, right? Where the ROI is greatest. So things that we can do is make sure that all those, we scan for, software, right? Making sure all those components, containers, everything are safe and secure. We're also going to talk about things that we also have in our advanced security pack, such as contextual analysis, which is, how do you prioritize this? How do you actually address it? And how do you remediate it? We like to say here at JFrog, you want our companies to innovate more and remediate less. And this is kind of our slogan behind it. So we've integrated it into every environment, from our APIs to our JFrog CLI. We have ID plugins. You have the ability to actually auto-evaluate binaries behind the scenes, so your developers can still do what they do, but before it even gets before that palette to create their art gets into their hands, they have the ability to make sure that it's safe, and the company can make sure that it's that it doesn't contain anything that could potentially threatening, like I said, both reputation and financial. But also, too, we provide things such as getting full visibility. And one of the things I'll talk about today is I'll show you full visibility, how you can track and trace, how you can get blast radius. And everybody's heard about things like software bill of materials, right? This became a mandate in May of 2021 when even the U.S. government put out a whole thing on how do we protect the software supply chain for the and the security posture. And Section 4, actually, it's funny I know this, talks about strictly software supply chain and also software bill of materials, that every corporation who works with the government needs to supply them with a list of ingredients, just like cake mixes or whatever you eat, understanding the components in there and be able to supply. But this SBOM is now bled over into other, areas of this outside of the public sector, right? This is now part of medical device companies. That's part of it because they have to do that too. Lots of corporations actually are starting to insist on getting software bill of materials as part of the insurance liability process of maybe dealing with a vendor. And this also is a way for you to control your security posture, right? So how do you go ahead and integrate it into your company with less disruption? That's really the key factor is building that foundation of security and storage and management and accountability just from the get-go. And like I said, we can deploy anywhere, right? So it could be in their own DC, it could be in their GCP, it can be managed by us, it can be managed by them, it can be managed by you. It doesn't matter. We deploy everywhere, and the same solution is consistent across the board. But we also supply other things, such as infrastructure as code analysis. The rise of infrastructure as code has been amazing. The faster you can deploy and operate software and also configure it is fantastic, but it has its own set of caveats. On top of that, we do things like secret detection, application exposures, and service exposures. Are there things running in the background that are just waiting there for something bad to happen? I have an example one time that I showed a customer where we scanned one of their containers, and they had a service that was waiting there for a TLS connection. It actually started in the container that they downloaded off the internet. It connected to a service somewhere, and the service said, "Hey, thanks for connecting. Give me your logs." Right? Crazy. But the biggest thing I'm going to show you today is that the sheer volume, that 650% increase in attacks, and then the constant increase from there, you're deluged with a massive amount of potential threats and vulnerabilities, which I'll show you. But one of the things I'm also going to show you today is contextual analysis. How do you whittle down the actual issues you might be facing as a corporation so you can address them sooner? So understanding that is one thing. Understanding how you store them is another. So this is just a quick overview. So when you talk to your customers, that you can get an understanding or an idea of what that means. And part of this is called repositories. As I stated, we have over 32 package types that we support natively out of the box, meaning that if you use us for a Docker registry, and our Docker registry, which I'll show you today, is absolutely fantastic, is the fact that, you can use Docker tag, Docker push, Docker pull. If you're using Maven, we actually produce the POM file for you. If you're doing something like Terraform, you just port your Terraform provider. You're doing things like NuGet development. You port your NuGet CLI, your Visual Studio Code, whatever, to Artifactory, and they just work. But understanding that there's different types of repositories outside of the package type, the language type, right? We have local repositories where you store your builds, your binaries, your files. This is where your customers put their stuff. Those third-party transitive dependencies, that 85 to 90%, are maintained and managed through remote repositories. And just so you know, remote repositories are a lazy proxy. What they mean is that it only stores the ones that were requested and all the transitive dependencies to support the requested library, right? So it's a lazy proxy. This also means that, like I said, if you have 1,000 developers and developer 0 requests a binary to do their job, as part of the process, it means that, and all those transitive dependencies, it means that 999 other developers will be able to utilize the same components. Layer on top of that XRAY and our security posturing, it means that they all get to use the same safe, sanitized, evaluated binaries, whether they're being evaluated, by the way, for malicious or nefarious components, license compliance by legal teams, or something I'll introduce you today, operational risk. And operational risk is, what's the longevity, what's the health of the actual open source project that's actually supplying the binaries to these developers, these corporations, to do what they do. And then we wrap that all together in a thing called a virtual repository. And what a virtual repository is an encapsulation. It can be local repositories, remote repositories, or virtual repositories. And the thing is that when we talk about local repositories, one of the things we're going to talk about today is, I mentioned it earlier on, which is that idea of being able to have consistency. So for dev, QA, staging, your SDLC, you can actually use these local repositories to emulate that. So when we look at something, that same example I showed earlier on, and we were to look at, adding Artifactory into the mix, you can see here on the right-hand side is now there's Artifactory, and then there's this little slide on the other part which says there's a virtual repository, there's the remote repository now laying as a proxy between the developer or tool that they use, maybe a CI tool like Jenkins or Google CodeBuild or one of those, and it proxies those requests there. Layer that in with XRAY to make sure it's safe and secure, and you've got yourself definitely a better footing out there. And if you look below that, you can actually see where I've got the local repository. I've got dev, I've got QA, and I've got production. Now, to use this, all I need to do is change both my npm install, so if I say in this case my npm client, or I can use our JFrog CLI. We have a full robust CLI tool. You can look it up. Everything I show you today in Artifactory, I'm just touching on some high points here, will actually allow you to do that. And in this case, I just changed the publish portion of my package.json to say when I do an npm publish, it's just going to go ahead and publish that into Artifactory. So also means is that when I sit down and talk with my customers, and I always do this with them, by the way, I say, hey, by the way, what is your SDLC? Well, we got development, we got testing. We actually have a QA team too. We do some staging and we do release. Well, great. Your repositories, your customers' repositories should reflect that. So when I'm designing this, I'm going to have dev, test, QA, staging, release, and production. And as I mentioned, we actually have a promotion API. So when I talk about this, the best way to think about this is that when I talk about software supply chain, when I talk about repositories, when I talk about the platform, if I were to lay it out this way, I would look at it in a mentality of having curation, creation, and consumption. It's 3 C's, right? It's hard to say sometimes, and obviously I just have that problem. But you can see here from left to right, if we were to go, this would be my development to deployment. We have the XRAY, capabilities for our plugins, the automatic assessment of repositories, the ability for you to build and distribute your software, whether you're distributing as web services to IoT devices to your customers or whatnot. You can use your own CI tooling. You can use ours pipelines product, but it's an end-to-end DevSecOps platform. And understanding that really allows you to go ahead and scale. Now, this is if you're working within a single instance, because one of the other things is your customers will have multi-site. So one of the things I want you to also understand when you're talking to your customers, whether they're moving from, say, their own DC to GCP, whether they have another cloud provider and they want to now use GCP as their primary one and they want to migrate over, whether they're using multiple GCP, regions and stuff, multi-site is now the way of the world, right? Whether it's development, production, you name it. Companies are global, especially after the pandemic. The amount of infrastructure in more global scale cloud deployments has grown substantially. And we actually are a way from, for companies to transition from, say, their own DC and lower TCO and all the OpEx and CapEx, it's CapEx stuff that people discuss every day. And the multi-site environments are important, so it allows you to synchronize, our solution allows you to synchronize between their on-prem and the cloud, between clouds, one-to-many, bi-directional. You can actually, the thing is you can grow to scale. The thing is we actually have our replication can be either star-based or mesh-based. It can be event-based, so it's real-time, or it can be cron-based, to make sure that, it's maybe after hours. The thing is it can be push or pull, so we can attribute to things like, like latency and low bandwidth. We designed this to really work with the customer in mind. And understanding that is really, something substantial. That we see this more and more every day. And we've been doing this for a long time. And replication has been one of the things that most companies out there, besides the fact that we have a robust solution, the number of package types, the inherent level of security that we offer, the accountability, the auditability, but the global scope is really where we shine and excel. And companies come to us all the time and they're like, we didn't realize you could do X, Y, and Z, but we're so excited that we can go ahead and actually now have the same thing everywhere our development teams, our production teams, our release teams, our services are deployed, where our devices are. It allows us to have, like I said, consistency and security. So let's take a look at this. And the only thing I'm going to do right now is I'm going to show you two examples. And the examples I want to show you are very important. So the first example that I want to show you is the fact that all those pieces, all those components that I showed you are actually on the same centralized interface. So if you look here, here's Artifactory, here's distribution, here's pipelines, here's XRAY, right? Your customers also have the freedom of choice for things like authentication providers. They can use their own authentication because we have more RBAC style controls. Companies can also break their solution down into projects, so they're a little bit more manageable, so they can have system admins and project level admins. The repositories that we have, like I talked about, the thing is, here's local, remote, virtual. We have federated, meaning you can federate those repositories globally in a very succinct and quick manner. And like I said, we have over 32 package types that we support natively out of the box. So we have something for your customers, and they are native. But let's look at an example of like what an output like this would look like. And I'll show you my favorite example that I love to show, because in my opinion, it really inherently shows what we can do as a solution. So let's go take a look at a standard web service, right? It's a standard web service. In this case, it happens to be a Docker image. And this Docker image that I'm using is hosting an NPM application, and it's also hosting a Java backend, right? It's a very standard web service. Just to let you know, true to its universal nature, I'm actually utilizing, in this case, Jenkins as my build server, right? And also, too, when your customers use it, we have plugins for these build systems, no matter what they are. And if we don't, they can use actually our JFrog CLI tool for that level of integration. But if we go back, you can see I mentioned the SDLC. So the repository structure that I built for this had dev, QA, staging, and production. And one of the things is I can see where it stands inside of my SDLC. So this one's been released. This is an arbitrary value that I set. Any customer can set this so it matches what their process is, whatever they call it. It's also critical. So just to let you know, when I talked about software supply chain, we are an authority. We are a CNA. We are a CVE number authority. We have a massive research team that actually supplies us. So we know what we talk about when it comes to security. We're producing CVEs all the time. Actually, the number is quite staggering. And as I mentioned, our security product is continuous. Because one of the things you need to keep in mind is that when we are building this, we store all our binaries as a checksum. And why is our XRAY product so efficient? Well, the main thing is that whenever you upload a binary into Artifactory, we tear it apart, we rip it to shreds, we turn it into a checksum. And that checksum, it represents the binary in the physical file store. And then we represent it via metadata in the database, which means it has all the context. And you can add more context, but this also means we never duplicate binaries. And you'll see one of the results from that in a minute, meaning that if I have 1,000 projects all using the same common core library, I store it once and reference it 1,000 times. And that also means that every binary can have its own level of context. This also expands out into our XRAY product because remember, CVE is metadata, right? All these vulnerability information is metadata. So we have a massive database that we update every single day to be as close to 0 day as possible. On the other side of it, we have this massive repository of metadata that represents the binaries your corporations use to build their software. So continuous security means we're doing metadata to metadata comparisons. And there are a series of actions you can take that we actually allow companies to do. You can do things when we talk about this, such as create things like JIRA tickets. Here's an example right here. I'm going to actually let this load for a second. Your customers might use something like Slack or MS Teams or something else in the future. But if you look here, we actually have a plugin that gives the ability to get direct alerts to your companies the way they need it. On top of that, before I dive into this, also to let you know, like I said, we have ID plugins where I can go in and actually the customer can go in and see how their developers see exactly what they're using while they're developing. And we also supply some level of remediation so they can go in and fix it, whether it's Eclipse, IntelliJ, Visual Studio, or in this case, VS Code. We also provide that level of protection, down to the desktop where I can even, if I'm a developer, I can even audit the things that I'm using, what I'm creating, and get back the information, including remediation data. Or in this case, I downloaded the jar file that I created out of Artifactory. I did a quick scan, and I'm able to go in and see, are there anything, that might be potentially threatening? And I mean, yes, don't get me wrong, this one was my test one, so there's a ton of threatening things in here, but also remediation. I mean, we even have it down to the desktop level. If you're using, say, the Docker desktop, when you install, say, Docker onto your desktop, so you can use the, Docker commands, it includes this. So we actually have an extension where you can go in and scan even Docker images that are on your desktop and do it more rapidly so you can actually have better attribution. But going back to the example I wanted to show you, let's go take a look at the big benefit. Now, in this case, I published a Docker container, like I said, with npm on one side and Java on the other. Now, a typical registry looks like this. It's a bunch of obfuscated image layers. You do a Docker run, a Docker pull, a Docker run, and then you're operational. But what if something goes wrong? I always pose this question to my customers, and you can do the same thing, which is, tell me what version of the npm app and what version of the Java app is living inside. Well, most people would say, well, it'll take me time. I've got to go in, I got to look at this, I got to look at that. There's a lot of information that needs to parse through. Well, if you follow our best practices, here you go. This is the Node frontend and the Java backend. I could tell you in seconds. I had a customer last year tell me his root cause analysis investigation time used to take days and weeks, and that was knocked down to minutes and hours. But what's cool is that also too, what if build number 126 was terrible? The performance is abysmal. How do I tell what changed between, say, a previous version? What was, it would take time. I'd have to pull it, run it. Well, you don't have to. I can actually compare the image layer. And if you look here, you can see that the Node frontend stayed the same, but the Java backend changed. I now have a place to start my analysis. I could also tell you all the environmental and system information on how this was created and what was run. I can even tell you, did somebody leave on the debug flag on again, right? So I can go in and be like, oh, no, not this time. The XRAY data, as I mentioned, we are a CNA. Now, in this case, I'm going to show you a security issue. Now, this is a terrible image. Just to let you know, I am building this using Spring. I'm actually using Spring Boot. My application that I'm running that supplies the data to my front end, my Node front end, actually parses out XML data and supplies it. So I'm using Jackson. And in this case, you can see that my parsing system actually has a critical issue. Well, let's go take a look at that CVE. Well, this CVE actually, if you look here, it says critical. Our security team has actually knocked it down to medium. And there's a reason behind that. So let's take a look at the source here. Well, the actual source and description, the summary and the description, somebody got lazy, told me nothing, and also just did a cut and paste. Well, our research team said that's unacceptable. So here's the details behind what we do, okay? And if you look here, you can see that we actually provide all the research that we did. We also supply the remediation at different levels. You want to replace, you want to repair, or just fix completely, and the reasons why we did it. But the interesting part too is we actually found this jar in a jar of a layer of an image of a build. Why? Remember I told you we tear things apart, we rip them to shreds, we turn them into checksums. This is one of the reasons, one of the things you get behind it. On top of that, here's all the license files, OS, runtime, application. Here's a concept we have called operational risk. This is the one I talked about, longevitude. So just to kind of show what that means, I'll show you my wiki page. And what that means is that, is these binaries end of life? What's the version of these binaries? Is there a new version available? And what's the health of the open source project? I also love this view, and this is one of the views I love, which is, most of the time we're back at that obfuscated image layer. We actually break down those images and the contents of those images, and you have the ability to view individual components in those images. And even if you want to, override the CVE value if you figure out that it's not applicable to you or not. On top of that, you can produce reports, violation, licensing, security, and operational risk. Here's software bill of materials, SPDX and cycle and DX formats. You choose your format output, and you can export it out immediately. You can also copy, connect to your Jira system and show all your Jira tickets here if you want it. I don't have any in this case in this one. But I can also do diffs between complete builds and complete images, right? So here's all my artifacts, my dependencies, and my environmental variables between two different builds, 126 and 94. I mentioned the promotion API, be able to promote the binary through the cycle. Under release history, I have a lot of arbitrary data I can add in here for every phase of my SDLC, so we become that single source of truth for everything that you build. But the cool thing is this, let's go back to the application layer, right? These are things that are really tangible to your customers, right? Where it matters most, the value we bring. Let's go look at that app layer. Here's that NPM build. Well, I can go from the application layer of my Docker container to the tar-gz, and I told you we tear them apart, jar files, WAR files, zip files, and whatnot. We can tell you all the generalized context behind that actual tar-gz. We can look at it and also its dependencies. I can look at its permissions. I can look at its own XRAY properties, right? So I can just see if there's any XRAY issues that I need to address as a developer. Here's all the metadata properties that I've added or that I've actually pulled, and I can add more if I want to. I could follow a binary and be notified if somebody maintains or changes it, because we also have things like webhooks and whatnot, the ability to instantaneously notify based on this non-dependent. We have integrations to most systems out there, whether it's PagerDuty, ServiceNow, or others. But also, we went from the application layer to the application. Well, here's the build that produced it. I was easily, within a couple of clicks, able to get to exactly where this build was built, and I could show you exactly where it's been used. Think about this. I just showed you in a couple of button clicks every place it's been used and how it was built, because now I can go from here and say, well, let's take a look, and maybe we compare that to a previous version that was out there, and I can go ahead and show you, here's the tar-gz and the build that produced it, but here's all 485 transit dependencies. But here's the thing. Is that whenever I showed you any of these XRAY data or any of these XRAY components, so I don't have XRAY turned on for this one, one of the major things that we get all the time is though, what about the sheer volume of actual issues and vulnerabilities? So we have our advanced security pack. One of the things I talked about really quick was contextual analysis. Here's 114 vulnerabilities. This would take any normal developer or team a tremendous amount of time for them to go in and actually evaluate each one of these to find out if it's applicable. Each one of these costs money. It also means interrupted development time, interrupted innovation. Our contextual analysis tells you Is the CVE, this is undetermined. Okay, great, you have to investigate, but check this out. Here's a critical CVE. If I click on here, we actually will tell you this CVE is not applicable to the usage of the binary itself. And we can show you that since you're not using this, you don't have to worry about it. That means we just took time, gave you time back actually for you to go in and do the evaluation. Or even better, yeah, here's one, it's applicable. I can go in here and show you exactly where you're being affected. Think about this. We just cut down the amount of time it takes for you to investigate so you could remediate faster. It's amazing. The big thing is that the amount of money it costs companies to investigate every single individual CVE, because it takes time. You need to read the CVE, you need to figure out what the issue is, and is it directly affecting what we're doing. We actually will pinpoint that for you. And this includes things like infrastructure as code. Also, are there any secrets? I don't know if there's any secrets in this one. There might not be. Look, there is, right? I can also see that, I actually have some weak passwords in here, and it's weird that I actually have passwords in here anyway. These are the kind of things that we bring to the table. This is the thing is that whether you're an individual organization or you're a global organization, the thing is that what we bring to the table is speed, efficiency, accuracy, consistency, and of course, above all, security. The more things that your customers can fix more rapidly, the more accountability you have, the better. I mean, just one last quick example. I love this part. Say you're doing a search on a particular binary. Your customer's like, are we being affected by it? I can see all the versions that I have. I can go in and see all the different ones. I could actually find maybe the exact one the article brought up. And I could tell you right away, within seconds, have we or are we being affected by it? So the thing is that security, consistency, it's insane. Our customer base is huge. But the thing is that this is a platform that makes software better, sustainable, manageable, and of course, overall secure. Well, thank you for your time today. I hope this has been beneficial. We look forward to working with you. If you have any more questions, please contact one of our JFrog reps. My team and myself will be available to you whenever you need it to have discussions around this. But just to let you know, this is the development platform going forward for the 21st century.
Thank you so much again, Bill, for this webinar, and feel free to reach out with every question. Thanks again, Bill.
Thank you, guys. Cheers, everyone.